So before we get into today's video, I wanted to kind of talk about what I have planned for this. This is going to become a video series where I take you guys through very basic steps on how to kind of start your own forge setup. As you just saw, I made a very primitive mud clay forge out of, again, mud that I just found. You can basically do the same thing by digging a hole. And then I also attached a blow dryer to a steel pipe via a soda can, which just happened to be the right size to fit the hair dryer itself. So this is going to be a multiple video series today. I'm going to be making some tongs out of some rusty pieces of metal that I had laying in my scrap bucket here. I'll be using this as my anvil, and I've got a 2.5 pound crossbeam hammer. This is a blacksmith's hammer. It was made for me by a blacksmith. However, you can use you can go to Home Depot and get an S-twing 2.5 pound crossbeam hammer and kind of radius the peen more than they have it, because it's not tailored for blacksmithing. But if you do that and you round the face a little bit, I actually have an S-twing hammer that I still use from about 5 years ago, that I used for like 3-ish years. I use it as a sledgehammer now, which is why I'm not using it, because it has a very rough face and wouldn't make a very clean product. So the rules for this series are that I am going to only use materials that I get out of my scrap bucket, and I'm only going to use what I make here, aside from the hammer, the anvil, and that hair dryer. The hair dryer itself was 20 bucks. I probably could have got one cheaper if I went to Walmart, but I wanted to go to Walgreens. It was closer. And I'm going to try and only use charcoal. The reason I say that, I may have to switch to coal because I do not have an infinite supply of charcoal, whereas I have practically an infinite supply of coal. But with that said, I'm going to get to forging the tongs. So I'm going to start off by using the same technique I used in my last video. I'm going to isolate some material here over the edge of my piece of steel that I'm using as an anvil. And it's cold already. This is not an ideal anvil setup. I am going to be making a stump anvil, so that will be fixed. That's going to be my next video, but I need something to actually hold the my projects, so tongs are the logical first project to do. So as you can see, I have the first jaw of the pair of tongs shaped. I'm going to go ahead and do the same to that other piece that I had earlier. And then I'm going to drill a hole, and I'll show you guys riveting it together as well. A quick note before I continue, I've realized a couple of things. I'm going to have to use some power tools to complete my projects. I'm going to limit myself to only using an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, a angle grinder with sandpaper discs, and a drill. Those are things that you can get for fairly cheap. If I were to recommend a brand, I have a Hitachi angle grinder that I've had for about 4 years, and it's still going strong. So I would definitely recommend that. That's a bit more of an expensive grinder, though. You can pick one up. I would not recommend the Harbor Freight one. It will break. The ones from Home Depot can work. They're sufficient for sure. So with that in mind, I'm going to adjust the rules so that I can use those 2 power tools. I may decide to only use files, in which case I won't use the sandpaper discs for the grinder, but I definitely will need to use it to cut the rivet off and other such things like that. So keep that in mind as we continue here. Generally speaking, most people have a drill and a lot of people have an angle grinder, so I shouldn't expect that it would be that much of an inconvenience for people to get those. However, I do want to keep this as simple and kind of self-built as possible, so I am going to limit it to just those 2 instead of, you know, using my belt grinder and all those other tools I use. I have the 2 pieces finally forged. I had to fix this side. It was actually I basically made 2 of the same side, so I had to flip it upside down, work on it that way. But I've discovered that this second piece here is a lot longer than the first piece, so I'm actually going to make the rivet out of the back end of the handles here, and then I'm going to cut everything off and drill it through, and then I'll show you guys the riveting process. The riveting process is going to be very interesting because I don't have any tongs to actually pick it up with. So I'm not exactly sure. I might have to use a pair of pliers, like generic pliers, to actually accomplish this. I think I'm going to do that because I see no other way of doing it. So instead of using the grinder to cut, I decided to use my old method of cutting before I even had a hot cut. And that was to use the corner of whatever surface I'm pounding on as kind of a smusher. But I've got the rivet here. I'm going to go ahead and heat it up, and I'll rivet the tongs together, and they'll be done. So I've got my pair of tongs done. They're not so much riveted together as there's just a piece of steel that is bent over. It didn't rivet properly, but that's probably because of the size of the rivet. They're a bit crude, but the thing is they work, and that is all that matters when you're beginning blacksmithing, is that you can make functional tools that work. So now that I've got this, the tongs made, the ability to grab things, I'm gonna go ahead and start fixing this issue because it's starting to drive me crazy, quite frankly. I'm gonna make a stump anvil. Now, as the rules state, I'm only allowed to use things from my scrap bucket. Luckily, there's about half of a crowbar in there, so I think that'll be enough material, hopefully, to get at least a rudimentary anvil surface to then make a larger anvil somewhere down the line. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that up with my angle grinder with the cutoff disc, and I will show you guys how I forge it. So I've gone ahead and cut up a piece of that crowbar I had. I've cut off some pieces down here at the bottom just to start that angle so that I don't have to do the whole thing on this dreadful little anvil I've got here. The nice thing about blacksmith tools is you can modify them. These, right now, are meant for picking up very small pieces. However, I can just heat the tip of these jaws up and squeeze this real hard, and then they'll be well suited for gripping this piece of crowbar I have. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'm gonna start forging down this point. The plan is I'm gonna make a long point on here, a long taper, and then I'll drill a pilot hole and smack this really deep into the log, and that should hold it there for a very long time. So I've gone ahead and modified the jaws here so that they can pick up the thick piece of crowbar. I'm gonna go ahead and stick it in the forge, and we'll start forging that tang. Okay, so after much struggling with the anvil and with this piece of metal, I finally have a rough taper on it. I am so excited to put this in there. I'm going to drill a pilot hole. I don't need to sharpen it because I'm drilling a pilot hole. I'm going to hammer it in, and then I'll have like an actual real anvil surface to use. So I'm so excited to be done with this block here. But again, it just makes you appreciate, you know, the first blacksmiths who were using rocks as their anvils and stuff. How much ingenuity they had to have, and how long it took them just to even forge their bloom steel, which is an incredibly hard material to work with, just down into like a manageable piece of actual metal. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get that installed, and then I will show you guys some things you can do with this setup.
So far in this video, everything has actually gone pretty much to plan, and this is where it started to not do that. So I had an issue where my little anvil there, as you can see, started sinking into the ground, or not into the ground, into the stump. And so I had to remedy that. I tried multiple things. What I ended up doing was cutting another piece, cutting some shoulders onto it, kind of like I would do with a knife tang, but on all four sides. And then that also, I mean, that helped a little bit, but it didn't actually solve the issue. So what I ended up having to do was weld two pieces of flat stock onto the side of that with my welder, which I know that's against the rules, but one does what one has to do in that kind of situation. And long story short, basically, I had to weld pieces of flat stock onto there so that it wouldn't sink into the log, at which point I could then resume the work on that piece that you see there. That's actually a hot cut, just made of mild steel. And so yeah.
So I've gone ahead and cleaned this edge up with a file and sharpened it. I'm going to go ahead and forge a taper on here and drill another hole and put the hot cut in. So today, while I was doing these projects, I was thinking about an interesting idea that I had, and let me know in the comments what you guys think about this idea. What would you guys think if I started like a website and I sold like blacksmith starter kits with a stump hot cut and a stump anvil, and then a set of like flat bit tongs or starter tongs or something like that? Now, obviously, I'm very limited by my setup here, so I can't actually make like high quality hot cuts and things, but you know, my stump anvil would be much bigger with a much bigger shoulder on it, so I wouldn't have to do a bunch of wacky welding and stuff to keep it from sinking, and the hot cut would definitely be made of a high carbon steel so that it wouldn't deform easily, and the tongs as well would be a lot more robust. I also, on that website, may want to sell other things, so just let me know in the comments what you guys think about that idea, so that I have a good idea of whether or not it would actually make sense to do that. Alright, so I've got the final stump hot cut made here. That's going to be it for today. I've been actually out here all day doing this, so I'm ready to retire from blacksmithing for the day at the very least. I need to resharpen this, and I'm going to hammer it into the stump, and that'll be that. As far as what am I going to do about this sinking into the wood, for one, it's a very long hot cut, so it's got a while to go before I'm going to have to replace it. And the second thing that I'm thinking is there's going to be a lot less force on here because as you're cutting, you're actually imparting a lot more force onto the steel that you're cutting versus the hot cut itself. So I'm thinking this is not going to sink really at all, or if it does, anywhere nearly as quickly as something like that little anvil will. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and a comment, and please subscribe. And don't forget to let me know what you guys think in the comments about me opening some kind of website or something to sell like blacksmith starter kits, or possibly blacksmithing equipment like tongs, or even other things like chef knives, because I also do enjoy making things like that. But with that in mind, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.